sometimes when you do humanitarian work, we forget that the first responders are the people themselves.
Absolutely.
There'll be people who will have lost people, and still they are the first responders trying to help their communities to respond.
Hello, welcome to Transcending Boundaries. I'm Reeta Roy, and I'm very honored to host an extraordinary leader whose career has been marked by a commitment to public service, a dedication to humanitarian efforts, and a passion for education. From her early years in Guyana, then moving to the UK as a child, and then making significant strides in government, diplomacy, and global humanitarian work, she has consistently broken barriers and championed equality. She's the first Black woman to be a member of the House of Lords in the UK. She's the first Black woman to be a member of the British Cabinet. She is the first Black woman to head an Oxford college. I am thrilled to host a true champion of global humanitarian efforts and an exceptional leader, the Right Honourable Baroness Valerie Amos, the Master of University College, Oxford. Welcome to Transcending Boundaries. Valerie, thank you for joining this podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled to have you. We're going to just enjoy this conversation, and I wanted to start by asking you about your childhood and growing up in Guyana with your brother and sister, with your parents who are both teachers. Talk about that time in life before you came to the UK.
Well, every time I look back, it feels like such a magical time. I think that there is something when you're an adult, when you look back on your childhood, and it feels as if it were very special, a very protected time. And of course, there are lots of challenges and difficulties in it. But the things that I really remember are that sense of being brought up by a community. So a wider family, a wider community that care about you. Everybody knew who we were. I mean, there was no way that you could get away with doing anything naughty anywhere because somebody would tell you off and then report you to your parents, but in a very kind of loving, holding way. I grew up in a tiny island in the mouth of the Essequibo River in Guyana. So I'm very much a country girl. My friends laugh about that now because I seem so urban. But, spending my summers all day running around with friends, no shoes on, and just enjoying nature. But it was also a childhood which had a lot of discipline in it, with parents who were both teachers. We were expected to do well. We studied hard. At one stage, my mother was my teacher, which meant I couldn't get away with anything, nothing at all. But Guyana and Guyana's children, the young people, really wanted to do well. We kind of had a competitive streak around education. We wanted to be the top of the class, and that was me. But I was also pretty quiet. Again, nobody who knows me now believes that, but I'm a great watcher and listener, and that goes all the way back to my childhood.
Amazing. Now, your parents immigrated, and obviously the whole family came to the UK, and it must have been a whole new world, whole different adventure. And how did you assimilate? Because you launched yourself right to school, became deputy head girl, as you said, your competitive streak, wanting to do well. But you must have been also a child experiencing a lot of new sensations, new surroundings. How did that form you?
Well, of course, it's really odd when you move from one place to another. It's exciting. And for us, because my father had moved 2 years before, so there was all the excitement of reconnecting with him. But I remember it in sort of light and shade. So Guyana, very bright, wonderful colors, amazing sunshine. It also rains every day in
Yes.
Guyana, so Britain didn't feel so different in that respect, apart from the heat. Um, Britain at that time felt very grey. As we were driving from the airport to the house where we were going to live, I just kept looking out of the car window and thinking, where's the sun? And the people were wearing drab clothes. It just felt very, very different. But there's also the excitement of being in a new place. And I remember we had very broad Guyanese accents, my sister, myself. My brother was still very young. And we lost them so quickly because as a child, you don't want to stand out, you don't want to be different. But we were the first black family in the neighborhood where we settled. So we stuck out like a sore thumb. And, on the whole, people were very warm and welcoming, but not everybody. And my parents were so important in terms of just helping us to adjust, helping us to understand where we had come from, understanding the importance of our history, our culture, our relationship to Britain, why we were there. And that helped a tremendous amount. And of course, we had wider family and friends in London. We were just into Kent. So we would go and see them at weekends. They would come and see us. So they really recreated that sense of family and community for us.
Sounded like they also grounded you in who you were.
Oh, very, very, very much. And that has stayed with me throughout my life.
When did this notion of public service or politics or global affairs enter your worldview? Was that something in school? Was it something you talked about at home? How did you come to that idea of a career in international affairs?
It's really difficult, I think, to put a finger on it. I don't think there was a particular moment or time. I think that my life evolved, and I come from a family where pretty much everyone was passionate about politics, about power, about the world. It was a time when many countries on the African continent were becoming independent. I mean, we talked about these things at home all the time. And as children, we were listening. We weren't necessarily a part of the conversations. I mean, this was a time when children were seen but not heard. Um, but it was very much there. I was curious. I read a lot. And I just had this strong sense, which I think came from my parents and my wider family, about the world not being fair, about the world not being just. And I wanted it to be fairer. I wanted it to be more just. And I do remember one thing. I mean, when I was about 16, I just had this very strong feeling that if I ran the world, it would be so much better.
Oh, of course, no doubt. It would be.
I thought, else I learned as an adult when I was engaged and continue to be engaged on global issues, international affairs, how hard it is. But there is that thing you have when you're young, I think, which is that excitement, that can do attitude. And that has always stayed with me. I know the constraints now, but I'm somebody who is always seeking to find solutions to difficult problems. Don't give me something easy to do. I always say to people, give me the most difficult things because it's the thing that really motivates me. So I think it just grew organically with me over time.
That's incredible. And when you talk about give me a tough solution, give me something you can sink your teeth in, and you certainly had your share of very, very challenging situations, events, world history, which you became a part of, and we're going to get into that. But just before we get there, I want to talk about entering the British civil service, entering public diplomacy. You were the first Black woman to be named a member of cabinet as the International Secretary for Development. What was that journey like? And as you came into that role, how did you know that you wanted to occupy it? And what did you want to be your mark on that role?
So you've asked me so many different
I know.
questions in there, Rita. Let me try and remember them all. I'll start with your point about occupying the role. Um, I'm someone who I have not planned my career.
Okay.
I've always been someone who has been interested in what's being offered and what the opportunities are in terms of the difference that I could make. So, uh, politics has always been a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been a member of the Labour Party. I care about fairness and justice. And that's a kind of central core theme for me. So when I was asked to go into the House of Lords,
Mm-hmm.
Tony Blair had become Prime Minister. You know, I was very surprised. I did not want to go into the House of Commons. I'd never had a passion to be an elected politician. But I thought this is a different kind of opportunity to make a difference. So I occupied that. So I was a member of Parliament. I was a member of the House of Lords, and I was asked if I would come into government, be a part of government as a junior minister, which I did. And getting the role of a Secretary of State, getting into the cabinet was completely unexpected. It was not something I had planned for. It was not something I had thought about, not least because, you know, as someone who has studied history and politics, I knew very well that, you know, in the way that the British political system has developed, the House of Commons was where the majority of cabinet ministers sat, not in the House of Lords. I mean, the leader of the House of Lords and the then chief whip sat in cabinet, but no other major secretaries of state. So when Claire Short resigned,
Mm-hmm.
and I was asked to be the Secretary of State, it came completely out of the blue. I got a phone call to go and see the Prime Minister. I had no idea what he wanted to see me about. And in fact, because I was his special envoy on Africa, I thought that there was an issue about that he wanted to talk to me. And it was not. And I sat and I just gazed at him. I don't think I ever said yes, actually.
Just looked at him.
I think he offered me the role, talked through what the priorities were for him, and I think I kind of staggered out of his office. And there were various, you know, down the corridor in Downing Street, there were various people who sort of smiling at me, and I left there just in a kind of complete whirl, going immediately from one job
To deal with.
to another, and you just have to get on with it. You go straight from one office to another, a different set of people looking after you. And I was told I needed to do a press conference that afternoon.
What did you do and how did you prepare?
Well, you know, you panic. I panic first of all,
Good.
thinking,
You're normal. Great.
what am I going to talk about? You know, I've just got this job. Of course, I did know about the development. I've been the spokesperson for development in the House of Lords. I was a Foreign Office minister. It was a huge passion and interest of mine. But getting my head round the government's priorities, you know, making sure that in a press conference I was absolutely clear about direction of travel. But the other thing that I had not really anticipated is that the press didn't really know much about me. I was in government, but I was one of those ministers that just went off and did her thing. I didn't court the press. I didn't have any particular interest in that. So this was also something that they wanted to talk to
So
me.
they were curious about you.
They were curious about me. But the big issue on the agenda, both for foreign policy and also for development at that stage, was Iraq. The war had happened. We were now in the next phase. I mean, it was a huge, controversial issue, both domestically and internationally. And the development piece of that, which is, you know, how was Britain actually going to contribute to ensuring that the people of Iraq actually got the benefits uh, their leadership now having gone was one of the big things. So that's what was in my in tray. Much of what the press conference was about that. And luckily for me, I'm somebody who always appears pretty calm, even if my feet under the water are going. So I got through that. And then, of course, it's straight into all the briefings from different parts of the department. And at that time, international development was a relatively small department in terms of numbers of ministers, but we had a huge budget. So thinking through how we continued with the priorities that we had established, how we continued to have the support of the British people to spend money on international development was a key part of what I needed to do, as well, of course, as working with colleagues to make sure that the overall British agenda in terms of foreign policy and development was being delivered.
That's incredible. Here you are, obviously very savvy, but thrust into this role. And as we know in government, there are multiple departments, multiple interests. There's security interests, economic interests, development interests. And in part is keeping that holistic view, but also influencing. What did you learn about yourself in this process as you had to navigate multiple stakeholders in government, the public? What did you learn?
So I think one of the things that's important is that it felt like a continuation, because in many roles that I had done before, working with others, influencing, growing alliances was all very much a part of that. You can't do things by yourself.
Right.
And when you're in a role like international development, which touches on so many things across government, I mean, finance being a big part of it, foreign policy being a big part of it, we were working in countries where we were seeking to improve what they were doing in terms of areas like health and education. Were there any examples from what we were doing, or indeed others were doing, that might be helpful? Making sure that you continued to get the resources, because one of the things that always happens is that you don't want development to become a political football. You don't want people in the country to think, well, why is it that my pension is not going up, but we are spending money on an education system in that country or building a health system in that country when our own health system needs help. So really getting the messages right, ensuring that people understand that as a wealthy country, we have a shared responsibility and a shared history across the world, but doing that in a light touch way takes a lot of thinking and a lot of working on. So that was very much a key part of the agenda, as well as the policy work that we were doing.
Yes.
Because Britain was at that time in a leadership position in relation to a lot of these development issues, we were seen as leading the way on a lot of policy development. A lot of brilliant people working in development, really pushing the boundaries on what we could do internationally if we worked together, if we pooled our resources in country, the difference that you could make in terms of supporting a government with their priorities, rather than just rolling in and saying, oh, actually, you need a well there or you need that there. Actually taking a much more strategic, long-term approach that would actually help the country's longer-term development. So always balancing the needs of the people and the priorities of government and the strategic direction of a country.
You spoke earlier about being a good listener and a good observer. And here you've mentioned brilliant people that you've met who are obviously very committed public servants. Connect some of those dots. Talk a bit about the people you met who were both influential in terms of your own thinking, but also inspiring in terms of just seeing that kind of dedication to wanting to do good in the world. And this must have also spoken so deeply to your sense of justice and equality.
So I always start with so many of the people I met on the ground, both when I was doing work in as Secretary of State for International Development, but also while I was at the UN, but also with some of the foundations that I've been involved in. And those people on the ground are always my inspiration um, for a number of different reasons. I mean, I recall so vividly when I was at the United Nations and I would go to visit refugee camps in places like, Turkey or the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Sudan. It could be anywhere in the world. And the concerns were always pretty much the same. The women worried for their families, worried for their children, particularly in some places worried for their girl children because of the sexual violence they might uh, uh, have to face. Many women making a very difficult choice to marry their daughters off early because they would be somebody they hoped who would protect them. Always a plea as to why the world had forgotten them. And there was no answer to that. I saw this repeated time and time and time again. But the thing that always sticks in my mind is the kindness of the people. People who had lost everything, but always thinking about how can I help someone else who may be worse off than me. I was once in South Sudan and there was a woman who, people were just leaving their areas because the armed groups were in major conflict with government, militia, and others. And they were just leaving their communities in their thousands, not sure where they were going. And we went to a particular part of South Sudan where some people had just settled for a few days. And there was a woman who was preparing for the next wave of people arriving because she knew they would come. She had barely settled herself. The way the women, when they were given some support or resources or a food pack, they would talk to each other about who wanted what and they would swap things. Tiny little things that made a difference in their lives. So they were always my inspiration to keep going because if they could do it, we could. Then the humanitarian workers. I've worked with so many people who put their lives in danger so that they could help others. And always you would feel when you knew that they were going into a conflict situation or something else, there was always that feeling that you might lose someone. I remember being in New York in the middle of the Syria crisis, and we had negotiated that a group of humanitarian workers could cross one of these lines to take humanitarian aid to a group over on the other side of the line. And we talked to everybody so that they would not be shot at. And I'm in New York in my apartment on a Saturday, and I get a phone call from the head of that group saying to me, "We're being shot at. Is there anything that you could do?" Essentially what he was asking me was, were there any of the allies of the Syrians or any other groups operating in Syria that I might be able to contact who might be able to stop it? But we didn't know who was shooting, and I felt completely useless. We worked the phones. In the end, they were safe, but there is nothing that you can do in that kind, or very little that you can do in that kind of situation because you're not there. You just have to support from a distance. And of course, I've met some extraordinary leaders. Our own board member at the MasterCard Foundation, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and the situation that she inherited in Liberia and the work that she was able to do to try to make a difference in her country. I had the privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela more than once. And I remember the first time I met him, I was a minister. I was not a member of the cabinet, and we were talking about Iraq and various other things. We didn't agree, but at a particular point, he said to me, "You are such a good advocate. You should be in the cabinet." This was March. I was in the cabinet by May. So when I saw him in December, I have a wonderful photograph of the two of us laughing together, because I'm saying to him, "Do you have any other plans for me? And if you do, could you just tell me
now.
what they are?" Amazing women working on human rights issues, working on issues related to domestic violence and violence against women. I have met so many people. I've had such a privileged life.
That's incredible stories about women and their leadership, not just their heart and their courage, but their leadership to demonstrate by example.
And if I may say something in relation to that,
Yeah.
Reeta, because I think sometimes when you do humanitarian work, we forget that the first responders are the people themselves.
Absolutely.
You know, there'll be people who will have lost people, and still they are the first responders trying to help their communities to respond. I mean, I saw this in the Philippines when Tacloban was destroyed. Um, People were looking for relatives. They were looking for members of their family. At the same time, they were trying to build places where people could shelter. They were looking for food. The community, the international community, hadn't arrived yet. The national resources hadn't arrived yet because they couldn't get there. So we should always remember that we need to support those first responders, because they are at the heart of the response in the first instance.
What does all this teach us about justice? And what does this teach us about what it means to lead a life that has purpose, but largely to create much more equity? Is it about making people who are invisible visible to others? What does it take to actually create justice?
Well, I think at the heart of it is recognizing that people need to have power over their own lives, that they need to have power to make decisions that have an impact on them. And we see over time just how power is taken away, decisions are taken further and further from the people who are affected by those decisions. And we see that people don't listen to them. I learned a really important lesson. We were talking to a group of women about what did they need. There had been a flood. Everything had been taken away. And so I was watching, the humanitarian workers were asking them, "Well, could we bring you some food, what health supplies, whatever." And the women said, "If you would just fix that bridge over there, we would be able to go and get everything that we needed." So by talking to them, their response of what they wanted was very different to what we had assumed they would need. People want their local economies to be back up and running. They want to take control over their own lives. This is just a tiny, tiny example. That will help to contribute to delivering equity, making sure that women have a voice.
Absolutely.
There have been so many conflicts where they're trying to find solutions to those conflicts, but they are not bringing women around the table, if you don't have all the different sections of your people represented, you're never going to get a peace that is lasting and is just. So there are a whole range of things that I think that we need to do. Of course, at a government level, how you deal with poverty and disadvantage. There are all of those big things, but I think that there are a lot of smaller things which are about recognizing that people need to have a voice. They need to have a say in the world and the work that affects them, which is where I think we need to start.
Excellent. No, it's important to have people to listen to them and to actually elevate their voices and let them speak for themselves. When you've confronted injustice and when you've confronted perhaps racism, perhaps, discrimination, or just complete disregard for what's right, how do you confront that and at the same time have influence and have an impact?
Do you mean personally or when you're talking?
Personally, it could be personally, could be
Right.
as you in your many leadership roles that you've held, when you've had to be that voice, that advocate for people who were not present, who could not speak for themselves at that moment. How do you go about doing that?
Well, at a personal level, I think we all make decisions, as it were, in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because the reality is, if you're a woman, you're a black person, you're a person of color, we face
All kinds of
these indignities every single day. And that is not how you want to spend your time. So we make decisions and choices about what we challenge, when,
Yes.
and why. Very occasionally, certainly in my case, it just gets to the point where you think, I really can't take this anymore. And you react to something which maybe yesterday you might not have reacted to. And that's because you want whatever you do and say to have an impact. And if we respond and react to everything,
it dilutes.
it dilutes and you lose that ability to have impact and influence. Where it's in an organizational setting, I am very considered about it because I'm very clear about where I want to get to. And then I think about how am I going to get there? Who do I need to influence? Who do I need to have in the tent as an ally? It may be that I have a path that I thought was the one that would get me there, but actually, the path has to change because you get new information or there's somebody who can help you with something else. And the big thing for me is I don't have to take the credit. I want the change to happen. Uh, I want to work with the people to make it happen. I don't have to take the credit for the change having happened by the end of the process. But I do think you need to be very, very intentional about it. And you need to be clear about what the barriers are going to be that are going to prevent you from being successful. It's the classic way in which we set objectives and deliver against them and monitor them. But the passion comes through the fact that, this is about our relationships as people.
Yes.
And about the fact that we are disadvantaging huge sectors of our communities because of personal prejudice and because of structural discrimination. We need to help people to understand that. And we need sometimes to help people who do demonstrate prejudice to actually appreciate and understand what they're doing. Because sometimes people do it unconsciously. Not always, but sometimes they do. And helping people to understand is, in the long run, I think, much better than isolating people because they may have made a mistake.
There's a huge lesson here for, I guess, future generations of leaders or leaders who we're mentoring right now, just to listen to what you've had to say about looking at the big picture, the goal, and recognizing the means to get there are just as important as the ends. It sort of calls on flexibility to some degree, generosity of spirit, some sense of adaptability, And there's nothing wrong with that in getting there. I think of so many movements right now in parts of the world which we care about, where young people are championing change, sometimes with angry voices and perhaps justified, and in other more quiet ways, also trying to influence change. So if you could
But
give
they
them,
all have a role.
they all have
They
a
all
role
have a
to
role,
play.
Rita. I
Yeah.
think the angry voices
Have
have
a role.
much place as the
Quiet.
quiet voices. Because one of the things, and you asked me about, lessons that I have learned. One of the things that I know absolutely clearly and I have seen over time is that if you're in an organization and you want to be a change agent in that organization, you want it to be different, you need the voices from outside that are saying, it's too slow. Uh, we demand X, we demand Y, because you may not get X and Y, but you may get much further along the way because of those voices
Right.
on the outside, which are pushing
For change.
the barriers down. So they may not recognize that you are wanting them to do that, because you can't necessarily say that. They may feel impatient that the change is not quick enough. But if you're really smart, you will use what they have created as a kind of springboard to make the change even deeper and more longer lasting than it might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Valerie, is there a moment, or maybe there's several moments in your career that you thought were just pivotal in terms of how you either took more risks or how you made a different decision? Anything come to mind? I just think of all the places you've been: Somalia, Central Africa Republic, just the Ebola crisis. Were there things that just when you look back, you say, that was the moment I went a different path?
Um, Maybe when the path changed a little.
Mm.
I mean, thinking about working on Syria, for example, there were so many countries that had interests in Syria. And one of the things that I really sought to do when I was at the UN was try to find ways of ensuring that we brought those voices in, because they were part of the solution. But, how do you get the US, Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UK, France, so many different countries to actually be in the same place to talk about some of the challenges that we were facing and how we might overcome them. And we were able to do that because we were working on humanitarian issues. If we had tried to do that through a political lens, it just would not have been the same. But, I spoke to the Russians when I wanted access. I spoke to the Iranians when I wanted access. I talked to the US. And through the humanitarian lens, we were able to bring those countries together, not always at the level that we wanted them to come together, but we would bring them together to try to help us to resolve some of these really difficult access challenges. And as a result of that work, we would sometimes just shift gear a little bit, think about some different things that we might do, what we were asking for. It took us, I think, 2 years to negotiate a cross-border resolution through the Security Council for Syria. We were only able to do that because you had Jordan, Australia, and Luxembourg, who at that time were non-permanent members of the Security Council, really doing the heavy lifting on that resolution. And we were always working together, thinking about, well, what could we do to bring more people together, more people on board. But I remember when, and again in relation to Syria, when I don't know if you remember President Obama's red line in terms of chemical weapons, and the red line was crossed. And the Syrians weren't sure what the next steps were going to be. And I had been trying to get into Syria for some time, and they had refused. At the point at which they thought that actually they might be bombed as a result of crossing the red line, I suddenly got a phone call saying, we'd be very happy for you to visit. I think on the basis that they thought if I were visiting,
They wouldn't be bombed.
they wouldn't be bombed. I didn't like to say I don't have that kind of power, but I did say, perhaps we could leave it a couple of weeks and I'll have a think if it could fit into my schedule at a later stage. It wasn't so much about changing tack, but more about saying, I'm not coming right now.
No.
It's not a good time.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. Valerie, you've broken so many barriers. There have been so many firsts in your career. I mean, you think about advice you would give to maybe your younger self or to another young person who might be following on in your path. What would you advise them?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, and I'm always a little wary of giving advice because this is a whole different world that they
live in.
are facing and that they are living. I think the first thing is that it's the other people who focus on the first, not you. So very often I have been the first person that's been in a particular role, and I've only realized it because I've been told by somebody else. So it's not the thing that you're going to focus on. You're just going to get on with your job, and then all these opportunities are going to open up and things will happen. And because you've done the best that you don't know everything. Because I do think that we kind of have a sense that we know everything. Be sponges, be open, learn, watch, listen. There's a huge world out there, and there is so much that we have to learn. And I think, I want to leave this world feeling that I'm still learning, that there is still knowledge out there that I don't have. And every day, actually, with what is happening in tech and everything else, I feel actually there's more that I don't know, more than ever. So there's that. I think it is in no way a failure to ask for help and to look for support. The challenges facing the world, we can't do any of it on our own. You could be as authoritarian as you like, and you couldn't do it on your own. So look for support. Talk to people who've had the same kind of experiences. Seek mentors. I mean, these are all people who will help and support you. Keep your feet firmly on the ground. I love my family. I love my friends because that's what
Keep
they
you there.
do. I'm Auntie Valerie, or I'm Sister Valerie, or whatever. I am not, this other person that's out there. That is so important. Enjoy it. I think so many of us, when we work hard, we see things that need to be done. We don't remember to enjoy time with family and friends. And actually enjoy the fact that we are in a position where we can make an impact. Very privileged place to be. So embrace it. And it's a wonderful world out there. Have passion, have vision. Think about how you want to live your life. You're not inhabiting somebody else's life, you're inhabiting your own.
Your own life. Oh, that's wonderful. Let's come back to your mum and dad. I know they passed away within 9 days of each other. In some ways, it just speaks to an incredible bond and love. And you and your sister, I think, and your brother have set up a trust, a bursary, the Amos bursary, to honor them. What are you hoping is their legacy? And what are you hoping to achieve through the bursary?
Well, they have an incredible legacy already, because they were so open, so generous. So many young people, our friends, that just connected with them. I remember when I was at university And if I went home, my mother would send all of these, food packages for to my friends, to me, but, for various friends. They would come to the UK. They were from all over the world. They would come to the UK. My mother would know before me that one of my friends had landed in the UK. So an incredible network of people to whom they had given love and support. And I think that's a huge part of their legacy. But of course, it continues through the Amos bursary. They died 9 days apart, as you said. We always say that was terrible for us, but good for them, because that connection that they had was so, so strong. And we saw it throughout our lives. It didn't mean that they didn't argue. It didn't mean that they didn't have different perspectives, but it was very strong. So when we were thinking about how could we honor them, that's the way the Amos Bursary got formed, because we thought education, really important for them. At the time we were thinking about this, young men of African Caribbean heritage were getting to university, but they weren't staying. They were dropping out at an incredibly high rate. So we thought, well, what could we do about this? And that's how the bursary was formed. We thought there are skills that they need to help them to stay, but they don't have those skills. We started with 7.
Okay.
We now take about 50 scholars a year,
Every year.
men and women. But in addition to that, we also have what we call an associates program, where we're not able to take all of those young people on the full program. So we do something online for a significant number of young people. It's about 700 now. We have a mentorship program, opportunities for internships, international experiences. But crucially, we support you in your last 2 years at school, your years at university, and then into work. The program has been incredibly successful. It operates now in London and Birmingham. So this is very much their legacy. These are young people who have aspiration, they have ability, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity. They're clever, but they haven't necessarily come from families or communities that can help them to negotiate that kind of challenging path from school through to university into work. And that's what we help them to do.
That's incredible. You're right about your parents' legacy. It's been powerful, but I can just see the love living on. And it goes right back to what you said. This is about our relationship to each other, to different generations, across generations, different parts of the world. But it's about loving people and giving them incredible opportunity.
And these young people are our future.
And they absolutely are our
It
future.
doesn't end with us. We are here for a tiny amount of time, where we are custodians of something.
Yes.
And we're only custodians to enable us to hand it on to someone else. That's what our life's journey is about for me. So I always want to be giving back.
You've walked us through your amazing life, giving back, honoring your parents. What's next for you?
Well, this is such a funny question, Reeta. A couple of days ago, I was going into Boston, and the immigration officer looked at my passport, looked at my age, looked at me and said, "Aren't you ever going to stop?" So the answer to that is no, I'm never going to stop. I don't know exactly what is next, but I'm excited by our young people, the things that they care about. Our world is going through some really challenging times right now. And if I can help and support those young people in any way as they try to bring about change, that's what I see myself as here for.
It's amazing. You stand for change. Thank you so much for being part of this show. It's been a real honor.
It's been great.
Honor to spend time with you. Thank you.
And you.
From Wakenham, Guyana, to the House of Lords in the UK, from serving in local government to becoming a member of cabinet, from supporting community relations to heading global humanitarian efforts, from a young girl in Guyana to the master of the University College, Oxford. The life journey of Baroness Valerie Amos is a beacon of hope and a series of powerful lessons on transcending boundaries. She continues to inspire and lead with a vision for a more equitable and compassionate global society.